Just like that, the Yankees sweep the Royals and get themselves back on track. The Royals are terrible. Just another day in the summer at a ballpark. Ain't nothing like it, even if it is the new Yankee Stadium. If you're under 35, a sports fan, especially a baseball fan, you know what this backdrop looks like. I'm sure you're very familiar with it. And you're probably wondering why a diehard Met fan like myself, you must be asking, what the hell is he doing here? What is happening, my good people? Today we're gonna go on a little field trip to a place that has haunted me pretty much to this day. And I've come to grips with not only wanting to go visit this location, but I do know two things. How precious it is, and also on top of that, comes with a little history lesson. Not just for me personally, but for the area that we're about to visit. Let's go. Well, here she is. I'm here for a couple of reasons. The first being this, or what's left of it. Do you understand the tradition, the history that this real estate here in the South Bronx, what it has, what it's done for the world of sports, in particular baseball, and so many wonderful moments that have been on this territory. So many World Series wins, so many historic moments, perfect games, you name it. Think about this. The greatest game that's ever played was actually a football game that played right behind me. But as I stand here, right at home plate, to think that Babe Ruth stood here, Lou Gehrig stood here, Mickey Mantle stood here and here. What about Joltin' Joe DiMaggio, Jackie Robinson, Willie Mays, countless players. I understand for the recent Yankee fan, Derek Jeter. Get it, 100%. And right behind this camera to the left of me is where Lou Gehrig, 84 years ago, had one of the biggest speeches in the history of this country, where he said that he was the luckiest man on the face of the earth while he was dying from ALS, a disease that still hasn't been cured almost 9 decades later. Here lies the pitching mound where Don Larson threw his perfect game in 1956. The same mound that David Wells also threw his perfect game in 98. David Cohn, another perfect game, 1999. Geez, even Dwight Gooden, a former Met, also threw a no-hitter, not a perfect game, right there on that mound. This batter's box could tell a lot of stories. Sadly, a little over 23 years ago to the day, Mike Piazza got hit in the head with a Roger Clemens fastball. And who would have thought that actually 3 months later in the World Series, he would swing at a pitch which would saw off his bat and go flying towards Roger Clemens on that same mound that I was on, and for him to catch the barrel, throw it toward Mike Piazza right up there in that first baseline and almost set off a civil war between Mets and Yankee fans. I've never screamed so louder in my life for any sport than that night, October 22nd, 2000. The pain of being a Met fan. And sticking with this first base line, there were also a couple events that brought a smile to the Met fan. Whether it was in 2003 when Josh Beckett actually tagged Jorge Posada around this area for the Marlins to beat the Yankees in a World Series. With the following year, if you recall, Alex Rodriguez slap on Bronson Arroyo as the ball goes flying when everybody thought they had first and second and were generating a rally there in Game 6, and then what happened? He was tagged out. At least there were some good moments for us suffering Met fans to at least be proud about, if you want to call it that. Now I'm standing near second base. A lot of controversial plays. Reggie Jackson in the World Series 1977 between the baseline, or maybe that was 78. Yes, Steve Garvey, Tom Lasorda coming out of the dugout, Hal McRae trying to break up a double play, Willie Randolph, I'm sure you still have nightmares to this day thinking about that. And I haven't even scratched the surface. Yes, I did talk about the greatest game that ever played in the NFL, December 28th, 1958, Colts, Giants, Johnny Unitas, Al Namici, overtime for a touchdown right here on this real estate. This is one of the reasons why I'm here. All of this square footage, which is for the most part still intact, and I'll get to that in a second. This is hallowed ground. This should be cherished. This should be worshipped. This is aura. I understand the stands and the roar of the crowd are long gone, and it's a far cry from that slab of concrete across the street. Don't let anyone or anybody tell you different. Right here, this is the cathedral. Not that museum/amusement park of a baseball stadium that's currently called Yankee Stadium. And as I stand at the lip of the outfield grass, let's not forget that there were some old heavyweight boxing matches that take place in the history of the sport that happened right here. Joe Louis, Max Schmeling, 1936, 1938, before World War II. African-American Joe Louis that he was. Same for Max Schmeling, who was a German, I might add, prior to what went on between 1941 and 1945. Who would have thought that those two fighters would have fought somewhere around here? Sugar Ray Robinson fought here. Rocky Marciano fought here. Rocky Graziano fought here. And of course, the incomparable Muhammad Ali, 1976 against Ken Norton. Now you understand why I had to come to these grounds to pay its respect? And now that leads me to my second point why I'm here. Imagine as a sports fan, just taking the time to walk here, to go to home plate, to even run around where the bases used to be, or even just to take a stroll in the outfield grass. Have people forgotten how many memories and just how many icons have played on the surface? To the point where, why hasn't the city or even the team, ownership, can't say I'm calling you out, but in a way I am, why haven't you kept this place at least to the point where people could come and visit, where they could just walk these grounds and put plaques in certain areas? Not just the Lou Gehrig plaque and a couple that may be in the grounds over outside of the fence here that surrounds an historic space. But I don't understand why, when people come to visit and know that it has its history and know that it has its place, not just in baseball, but in sports, because when you take a look at it, it's a shell of its old self. This is actually the 100th anniversary of this stadium, or at least the field that was once Yankee Stadium. And 100 years later, it's pretty much left in silence, almost left for dead, considering that when they closed their doors back in 2008, I wonder how many people come here to want to revere this place, and rightfully so. For them to come and look and say, the grass hasn't been cut, you have water and spots on the infield, like so. And I understand it costs money. I understand that the upkeep and to try to keep it pristine is next to impossible. But you would think that this would be not only a tribute, but to pay homage to the generations, to the grandfathers, the uncles, fathers, etc., that have come here to watch, whether it was a baseball game, football, boxing match, etc., for them to come here to cherish those memories for one last time, or maybe even for several times, as long as they come visit this area. And I get it that they turned the space with a couple of ball fields in the outfield into a public park for people to come and enjoy, and they've actually made the surrounding area pretty nice. They have a beautiful soccer field as well as a track that's just steps away. But this is why I feel it's important for them to have some sort of upkeep to the space. Reason number one, you see those buildings over there, right on the other side of those trees? That's where the Polo Grounds was. The Polo Grounds were the Yankees' home before they moved into the space back 100 years ago. And the Polo Grounds, they barely have a plaque or any type of commemorative space to show that the New York Giants, a la Willie Mays, to say, hey kid, once played there. Or if you're an old-time Dodger fan, and I mean old, way back old, and if you wanted to go visit the site of Ebbets Field, it's also a housing development which has a sign sitting right outside saying, this is where Ebbets Field once stood. And then if you go to Shea Stadium, or formerly known as Shea Stadium, it's in the parking lot where Citi Field has been built the same year that Yankee Stadium, or at least a new one, was built back in 2009. And even in the parking lot, they have the bases and the pitching mound, or what was once the pitching mound, there for the fans to go in the parking lot to see home plate, first base, second base, etc., to where at least they have that as places to commemorate where Shea Stadium once was. Maybe I have a thought for my next video. I'm sure I'm not alone on this. I would think that the diehard Yankee fans in my life, or even just diehard Yankee fans all over, would love to come here and tell their grandkids that, wow, look at this plaque on Babe Ruth, or Lou Gehrig, or Joe DiMaggio, even Derek Jeter for that matter, considering that he's just went into the Hall of Fame. I would think that they want to have something here that they could visit every time they come to the stadium, that they could show their grandkids, their kids, etc. And this is coming from a Met fan! True story. At the very beginning of this video, I did mention that this place had haunted me for so many years. Now, I understand it's long gone, and people can say, Jay Reels, just get over it, but I gotta get off my chest. June 5th, 1999, I was here with my good friend John, who I won't mention his last name just to protect his identity, sat here in the middle game of a 3-game regular season Subway Series, Saturday afternoon, where the Mets jumped out to a 3-0 lead, and then Masato Yoshii, remember him, Met fans? He was then just batted around this ballpark, this field that I stand on, where Tino Martinez hit a shot to the top of the foul pole in right field. Yankees win 6-3 in the middle of their heyday. 4 championships in 5 years, the year after their historic 125-50 season, the 98 Yanks, who could ever forget them? And as I'm walking out of this stadium with a Met hat on and just plain old t-shirt and shorts, I got heckled left, right, up, down, sideways, behind, you name it. Go back to Queens, Mets suck, get out of here, you don't belong, ha ha. And guess what? As damaged as I've been ever since a little boy, I said, this is it. I am never coming back. I am not going to step foot in this stadium as long as I'm alive. Until 6 years ago. You see that iconic building up there? That is the courthouse that has been there probably since the beginning of time. And in October of 2017, I actually had jury duty in that building. So after jury duty, I decided to come down here to see what was left of this venerable and maybe not so beautiful space. So I decided to take a walk around the base paths, stand at home plate, do all of that. And not to say that this was a precursor that 6 years later they would come about with a video like this, but it did make me think, even then, more so than now, why hasn't this space been taken care of? Why has this area just been left in shambles? A place that should be revered for not only just the baseball fan, the Yankee fan, but the sports fan. Sadly, this area is pretty much lost and forgotten. It's a shell of its old self. And as you can see, it definitely looks that way. Who would have thought that me, yours truly, Jay Reels, diehard Met fan, bleed blue and orange, would actually come here to pay respect and honor this field for everything that it put forth. As everybody knows, I'm a sports fan, tried and true, ever since I came out of the womb. And I'd be remiss to not come here to at least acknowledge that. If nobody else has before, and if nobody else after. Or maybe they will. Or maybe the ownership across the street, if somehow, some way catches wind of this, maybe they'll look at that and make a tweak or two. Do I expect that? They're gonna be like, who's this little guy who may know what he's talking about, but at the same time, is just a little fly on this big giant wall called the sports universe. This is my platform, this is my voice, so this is why I came here. To think. Jim Brown played here, he just passed away a few months ago. The great Jim Brown, Dick Butkus, Vince Lombardi and Tom Landry, who are coaches on those New York Giant teams, that 1958 championship game that I talked about, they coached on this field. And we know how big Vince Lombardi and Tom Landry are, but everybody knows my heart is baseball, first and foremost. Always has, always will be. For me to do this was a no-brainer. It's kind of like hitting a walk-off homer in the bottom of the 12th inning of a championship series to go to the World Series. Something that the current Yankee manager is familiar with. And he did it. Right there.
Start spreading the news. I'm leaving today. I wanna be a part of it. New York, New York. These vagabond shoes